So as I was out walking today, as I was reviewing, and then Brian, if you weren't here tonight, I was going to mention that. So I had reached out to him because I know he had expressed that his brother-in-law was, he was battling for his life. And then I'd forgotten about that, and I looked, I said, oh wow, I wonder how that's going. Pray. Hey Brian, how's it going? And then I got the news before you guys did tonight. So it was just such a blessing recovering that. And so if you're like me and you're hearing all this stuff and then you get out the door and it's gone. The thing is gone from me, like Nebuchadnezzar. So I had such a blessing today praying for you guys, and so I would just encourage you to do the same. And it was just really good, because God does answer prayer. Those of us that are parents, we want to bless our children more than they want to be blessed. And so if we want to do that, how much more does He want to pour out His blessings on each and every one of us? And so it was definitely encouraging hearing everything here tonight. I'm going to launch into something a little different and a little bit of a background here before I launch into this. When the Reformers were studying the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, particularly Daniel 7 about the little horn, Revelation 13 about the beast that comes up out of the sea, Revelation 17, as they began to read and understand those prophecies, they pointed forward to the Roman Catholic Church-state system. And although they didn't have as accurate a grasp of the year-day principle, hindsight is always 20/20, it still applied. And so in the Catholic Counter-Reformation during the 16th century, one of the ways in which the church tried to deflect the incriminating finger of prophecy was to say that these prophecies either applied to the past, and so they would make Nero the emperor like the Antichrist, or it would apply to someone in the distant future. And common to both approaches was the elimination of the year-day principle. Okay, so because once that principle goes, then we can no longer identify who the little horn is. We can't identify who the beast of Revelation 13 is. We cannot identify who the two witnesses are in Revelation chapter 11, and so forth and so on. We destroy the greatest proof of the fact that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah when we don't apply the year-day principle to Daniel chapter 9. The 2300 days is obviously gone, and then there are other prophecies like the 1290-day prophecy and the 1335-day prophecy that are mentioned in Daniel that are also now being interpreted in a literal way among some of us. And so during the Catholic Counter-Reformation, they had stated, I think it was Cardinal Bellarmine, and I forget who the other guy was. They had particularly stated that those time periods are literal time periods. All right, so that's a little bit of theological background in that should be kind of functioning there before I launch into this presentation here. But we'll be able to draw many more examples of courage and faith and how God has everything under control, and how He who takes care of the stars in the vast circuit of their appointed path has governed the times and the seasons with remarkable accuracy, and we can really put our trust in Him, not only regarding these big macro subjects, but on a day-to-day basis. That was a wonderful testimony, Mary, of just how you chose to, you know what, the Sabbath is here, I'm going to put my trust in Him, and then, we'll look later and see what happens. And that's what God wants us to do, and He wants us to hang our hopes and our dreams on Him. And so, all right, we're gonna launch into the Cheseaux discovery. We'll introduce who he is as we this is connected to what's called the Daniel cycle. Now, Most of this, I'll just tell you, is just straight up plagiarism, okay? And I'll tell you why. There is a sevenfold prophecy between the books of Daniel and Revelation that encompasses a certain time period that is mentioned 3 times. I remember I was teaching at Ouachita Hills, and I was going through a crisis, and I was teaching a class on Daniel and Revelation. And I had noticed this, that I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I wonder why this is mentioned, so many times. Well, surely somebody with more brain power than I have has already looked into this. So I combed through everything I have, all the commentaries that I have, either in book form or in electronic form on in my library, and I'm coming up with nothing. Like, wow, this just seems interesting that no one, it's mentioned 7 times. Surely that's significant. No one has dealt with it. Well, then I pick up, and I just brought it here. Thought about it. Where'd it go? Okie doke. There it is right there. Unfortunately, there are no more print copies of this. Maybe somebody has them, but this is de Kock's Christ and Antichrist in Prophecy and History. If you want the PDF, I have it. All you need to do is text me. And so I said, all right, let me look at the table of contents here. Let's see what it has to say. This is a big, thick book. And so I'm looking at I'm trying to look at the table of contents here. Okay. I usually put it right up in front. But boy, he's really, aha. And what do I find as I look at page 310? The sevenfold prophecy in the year-day principle. I'm like, oh. Like, I can't believe it. Somebody has written about this. And I was just so blown away by this chapter that I began to develop like presentations on it and everything like that. And so that's why I say this is like just straight up plagiarism, most of it. All right, so and it really helped me at the time to know that, wow, God is in some serious control here. He's got, my life might be like completely a mess right now and turned completely upside down, but he's got everything under control. So, and it really kind of helped me on a personal level, even though it was kind of theological. So de Cheseaux' discovery, the Daniel cycle, a sevenfold prophecy, and your future. So I was sharing this with college students who were graduating, and they're wondering, what does the future hold? And so we'll talk about the devil's tactics first. He generates problems through lies. And there's not only the doctrinal lies that are out there that are soul ensnaring, but there's also lies that we have come to believe about ourselves. And as I looked through and I saw some of the books that Lisa was are going to be using in the Nedley recovery, it struck me, yes, those are powerful lies too. We can believe the truth about the systems of truth, but then there's lies that we believe about us. And so it doesn't matter where they come from, they're always soul destroying. So he generates the lies, and then when people hunger for a solution, he's already one step ahead of the process, and he provides a solution, so to speak. Because he knows that those lies are going to run their course, and the people are going to, they're going to see through what's happening, so I got to present something else. The result is, in medicine, they say the cure is worse than the disease. Now, I want you to try to guess what year this was written. This is our current political situation. So just try to guess the year as I read. One of the wonderful things about America, to my mind, is this, that for more than a generation, it has allowed itself to be governed by persons who were not invited to govern it. A singular thing about the people of the United States is their almost infinite patience, their willingness to stand quietly by and see things done which they have voted against and do not want done. I wish I could cover up the next screen on the bottom, but anyway. Oh, there's more. Okay, good. and yet never lay the hand of disorder upon any arrangement of government. Let me repeat that sentence. Anyway, they have some infinite patience. They stand quietly by and see things done which they have voted against and do not want done, and yet never lay the hand of disorder upon any arrangement of government. There is hardly a part of the United States where men are not aware that secret private purposes and interests have been running the government. They have been running it through the agency of those interesting persons whom we call political bosses. All right, so is this something recent? What year was this written in? Let's see. Oh, he gets an A+. Yes. Yeah, Woodrow Wilson, The New Freedom. Let me continue reading. A boss is not so much a politician as the business agent in politics of the special interests. The boss is not a partisan. He is quite above politics. He has an understanding with the boss of the other party so that whether it is heads or tails, we lose. The two receive contributions from the same sources, and they spend those contributions for the same purposes. Anyway, so that's 1913. That's what I was asking him. Is this kind of like today, or? So he who was discerning that back then. So our current political situation. All right, our current economic situation. This is a little old. January 8th, 2013, in Forbes. Ignoring warning signs has inevitable consequences. We just ignored them before and we saw what happened. We can say this with virtual certainty. If we continue as now and ignore them again, the great white shark of a global financial meltdown will gobble up the meager economic recovery and make 2008 look like a hiccup. Does anyone remember what happened in 2008? It was the Freddie Mac and the housing bust. That happened back then. I thought it was 2008. And so, all right. What about the situation in America? This comes from the economic collapse. America, #1 in fear, stress, anger, divorce, obesity, antidepressants, etc. I might not read the whole thing because it's too depressing. So, but this is what the devil does. He encourages us not to rely on God and then to rely on ourselves, and then so suicide has surpassed car accidents as the #1 cause of injury, death in the United States. More U.S. soldiers killed themselves than were killed in combat last year, and I think this is still around. Maybe I'll have the year for it later. $280 billion on prescription drugs in 2013. 1 out of 4 women on antidepressants. A third of the nation's employees suffer chronic debilitating stress, and more than half of all millennials, 18 to 33, experience a level of stress that keeps them awake at night, including large numbers diagnosed with depression or anxiety disorder. And I think all of these statistics were before this. Okay, this might have been even before this. Now this has launched this has made this exponentially worse. 28 million Americans have a drinking problem, 22 million use illegal drugs. More people have been diagnosed with mental disorders in America than anywhere else on earth. Again, this is maybe this source. I didn't do an exhaustive thing, so I'm just quoting someone else here. There's anxiety disorders. We're #2. We're #1 in obesity. Mexico is #2. It used to be much different. The U.S. has the highest divorce rate in the world by a good margin. It has the highest percentage of one-person households on the entire planet. Now, in the 1960s, okay, so 51% of all American adults are currently married. Back in 1960, 72% of all adults in the U.S. were married. What happened in the 1960s?
Women's rights.
Women's rights, the sexual revolution, yes, all of those things. 1 out of every 3 children in America lives in a home without a father. Okay, so problems. Okay, what's the devil's solution? This is Great Controversy 589. Through spiritualism, Satan appears as a benefactor of the race, healing the diseases of the people and professing to present a new and a more exalted system of religious faith, but at the same time he works as a destroyer. His temptations are leading multitudes to ruin. Intemperance dethrones reason, sensual indulgence, strife, and bloodshed follow. So he causes all the destruction on one end and then appears as the benefactor of the human race on the other, stating, hey, there's a solution to all this. Satan delights in war, for it excites the worst passions of the soul and then sweeps into eternity its victims steeped in vice and blood. It is his object to incite the nations to war against one another, for he can thus divert the minds of the people from the work of preparation to stand in the day of God. So we need reasons to believe that are more powerful than the temptations we face. We need reasons to believe that are more powerful than the clamoring of the sinful nature. The uncertainty, I was talking to graduates, of where we're going to go after we graduate. We need reasons that are more powerful than miracles, signs, and wonders that will lead people to receive the mark of the beast. So what is the answer to all this? Believe it or not, that's it up there. I'll explain. So what is it that we're viewing up there? Well, we see the sun. It's not moving anywhere, and the earth is revolving around the sun, and the moon is revolving around the earth, and both of them are revolving around the sun. Now, if I'll just wait till it comes around a little bit before I pause it. Let's say we were to pause right there. Let's say we were to pause this right there. You can pause it at any place, doesn't really matter. And ask the question, how long would it take before these luminary bodies arrive at the exact same location? How long would it take? All right, so we've hit the pause button, so they're lined up now in a straight line, in this straight line right here. How long would it take them to arrive at the same point?
1 year.
Uh-huh. It's not as easy as it appears. But it's the answer to the question. It is this. If we can figure this out, it's the answer to this. And I was just, of course, asking ChatGPT, how easy has it been to harmonize the yearly, daily, and monthly cycles? It's not easy at all. Before observations were as accurate as they are today, the ancients grappled with this question. To them, there were 29 or 30 days to the month and 12 months to the year. No problem, right? Well, for a time this would work well, but each year it would get more out of harmony with the true course of the sun by 11 days. 16 years later, New Year's Day would begin in the autumn instead of spring, and in 33 years it would work its way back to spring again. Astronomers and mathematicians have tried for centuries to harmonize the daily, monthly, and yearly cycles. So there are 4 possible harmonizations. You can harmonize the day and the year. You can harmonize the year and the month. You can harmonize the day and the month. Or you can go for the whole enchilada and harmonize all 3, the day, the month, and the year. All right? Now here's the problem. A year, 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, 49 seconds. A month, 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, 3 seconds. A day, exactly 24 hours. That's the simple one. All right, so how many of you liked math? When I did this presentation at the college, I said, look, if you guys can solve this problem, you'll never have to take another math class from this institution ever again. So, any takers? Well, all right. Well, let's see if we can solve this and see what it has to do with this 7-fold prophecy and your future. Well, there was a process of discovery here, and you can read all about this in de Kock's book. There was a switch from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar in the 16th century. According to the Julian calendar, it had an error of 1 day in 128 years. I mean, who's going to be around? I mean, who cares, right? I mean, I'm going to live to 70. Let them figure it out. But when it comes to science, that's just not good enough. Like those engineers that build bridges and all that, they got to do way better than this. I mean, yeah, there's way better than this. This is like there's no way we're driving over that if it has an error of that sort. The Gregorian calendar has an error of about 1 day in 3,300 years. Okay, this is close, but not perfect. About the same time as Sir Isaac Newton, I don't think he needs an introduction to most of us, another Protestant scientist, a Frenchman, M. Jean-Philippe. Are there any French folk here? Okay. Now the L-O-Y-S, I believe, is pronounced Lois, according to the French. Okay. So M. Jean-Philippe Lois de Cheseaux was doing chronological research. The other place where you can find some of this information is there was a scholar in church, Leroy Edwin Froome, and he wrote these 4 massive volumes called The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. So you can find some of this information in there as well. He was a correspondent of the Royal Academy of Sciences in Paris. All right, so this was not just some guy, like how we have July 4th and you can buy firecrackers and all that. He wasn't some weekender putting some firecrackers together and all of that. So he was a correspondent of the Royal Academy of Sciences in Paris and a foreign associate of the Academy in, now my German's a little rusty, so I don't know how to do the letter O with is it the I don't know how to pronounce the umlaut. Okay, Göttingen, Germany. Excuse me for all the Germans that are out there. But I have a last name that's impronounceable as well, so I get a lot of it on the receiving end also. He was seeking, de Cheseaux, was seeking for an accurate date for the crucifixion. What I find amazing and interesting is that a lot of the science that happened in Western Europe was done by people who had an intense respect for the Bible. They really had an intense respect for the Bible. And so you got guys like Newton. He wrote almost as much on prophecy that he did on science, and his prophetic expositions have stood the test of time, many of them. And so it may be surprising to evolutionists today, but these guys were deeply interested in the Bible and had written a lot. So he was seeking for an accurate date for the crucifixion. During this time, he was closely examining the prophecies of Daniel, especially Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, the 70-week and the 2300-day prophecy. You'll find that in Daniel 8:14 and in Daniel 9, verses 25 to 27. He noticed the link between days and years. And we'll get into that as we look a little bit in the book of Daniel. In a moment, you'll see those links. He wondered about the close relationship between the 1260. Now, when you look in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, the little horn was to reign for a time, times, and half a time, or 3.5 times, from which we get the 1260-year prophecy. So he looked at this close relationship between the 1260 and the 2300 days conceived as years. He also noticed that they were linked together by common themes. And so some of the common themes are you have desecration, you have the persecution of God's people, you have Daniel praying, there's some other themes. Now this led to a brilliant idea. Now in science, as in other disciplines, when you have a problem to solve, you have to come up with what's called a hypothesis, right? Several of you are voicing it out. And so what is a hypothesis? Now, a hypothesis in the beginning is something that you can't prove. You have to theorize it and then test it. So you can't prove the hypothesis, but you have to have something to go on in order to try to solve a problem. Now, if the hypothesis works, should it matter where it comes from? No. So in other words, some are saying, well, okay, but that comes from the Bible. Yeah, but if it works, what's the problem? You couldn't solve the problem. So if it works, why is there a problem? So this led to a brilliant idea. So as Cheseaux was just, looking through it, a brilliant idea. He began to scrutinize these periods these time periods from an astronomical point of view. So in other words, he began to think about these in such a way as to solve this problem, the harmonization of the daily, the monthly, and the yearly cycles. So, okay, I got a hypothesis. He began to wonder if the 1260 and the 2300 days years might be the key to resolving the day and the year and the month, the day and the month, or all three, the day, the month, and the year. He's like, it's a hypothesis. We'll give it a shot. See if this might be the key. No one else has been able to figure this out. Now remember, this was taking place in the 19th century against the backdrop of the Roman Catholic view that these time periods do not represent years, but they represent literal days as well. And this had gained quite a powerful effect on the Protestants, okay? Through Darby's books and dispensationalism, and so this started moving in that direction, and so this was sweeping across Protestantism, and many of them were falling prey to ideas that had begun in the Catholic Counter-Reformation, in which they had to do away with the year-day principle because it was pointing so strongly at the papacy. And so this is the context. Now notice this, the sevenfold prophecy and the year-day principle. We're going to go through roughly all seven mentions here. So the little horn shall wear out the saints of the Most High for a times, and then 2 times, and half a time. Now, there's no way we can tell who the little horn is if we have a problem with the year-day principle. So this either represents 3.5 literal years or 1,260 years. Okay? So, and if we have it wrong, we're not going to be able to identify not only who the little horn is, we're not going to be able to identify this massive persecution of God's people that was taking place during this time period. And I'm hoping that makes sense. Daniel chapter 12, verse 7, this is the second time it's mentioned in the book of Daniel. It would be for a time, 2 times, and half a time. What is it that would be? The shattering by the abomination that makes desolate of the power of the holy people. All right, so again, same problem. If it's 3.5 years or 1,260 years, the incorrect view is going to affect who the abomination is that makes desolate, what this abomination of desolation is, who the holy people are that are being scattered. All of that will be highly questionable. So now we go to the book of Revelation and the passages that are there. The third one, in Revelation chapter 11, verse 2, the nations or the Gentiles will trample over the holy city for 42 months. And so now we have a time period of a monthly time period. In the others, we had a yearly time period, a time, times, and a half a time. Now it's stated as 42 months. If we are incorrect in that, then we won't be able to identify who the holy city is and what the nature of this trampling is all about. We continue on in the next verse. I will grant my 2 witnesses power to prophesy for, now it moves to a different way to express the time period, for 1,260 days. And then in verse 7 it says, the beast that ascends from the bottomless pit will make war upon them, referring to the 2 witnesses, and conquer them and kill them. All right, if this is a literal 3.5 years, then the witnesses might be able to be literal human beings, because our lifespan does take into account 3.5 years. However, If it is 1,260 years, can the two witnesses be human? No, they can't be human. Okay? They cannot be human. So there's a major parting of the ways here. So there's no way to identify the witnesses without first going through the year-day principle. It will be impossible to identify who they are. And again, it's impossible to identify what the holy city is. Not only that, but there's a beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit. At the end of that 1,260 days, we will not be able to figure out what that represents either, if we have the time period incorrect. All right, so there's a couple of more. Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. The woman fled into the wilderness. She's fleeing from the dragon. And why did she flee there? To be nourished for 1,260 days. All right, well, again, who does this woman represent? If we have the time period incorrect, then we might have the identification of the woman as incorrect. Revelation 12, 14, and 15. To the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Now take a look at those two up there and notice the similarities between the two, but then also notice the difference. What's some of the similarities? Nourished, okay. That occurs in both passages. So she's fleeing in the first one, and she's given 2 wings. I suppose if you have 2 wings, you can flee. Okay. All right, she's nourished. Now, the time period is expressed in 2 different ways. On the one hand, it's expressed as 1,260 days, but then on the other hand, it's expressed as time, times, and half a time. And so those then are 2 different ways of expressing the exact same time period. So time, times, and half a times equals 1,260 days. So those are some internal controls then that we can use. All right, and the last one is in Revelation 13, verses 5 to 7. Power was given unto him, that's to the beast, to continue 42 months, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. All right, so that's the sevenfold prophecy then in the year-day principle. These are all the times in which this is mentioned. I want to read the introduction of this chapter in de Kock's book. I might have mentioned it before, but I think just reading it the way he has phrased it is very interesting. Oops, got to get the shades. The font is a little small. When a mighty king, a good man, but with the power of life and death, repeats himself, his subjects will ponder his words and take him very seriously. If he does it 4 times, it will cause consternation. But what will they do if he is so concerned that he warns about it 7 times? In the next paragraph, he states, God also at times repeats himself. For instance, the 10 Commandments are written twice. 4 Gospels delineate Christ's life and teachings. And a 7-fold prophecy warns against Satan and the Antichrist. As we read the following series of predictions, let us note how similar they are to one another, and we have just read those. So, isn't it interesting that as I put that little video of the sun and then the earth and the moon revolving around it, isn't it interesting that there are 3 different ways of expressing the same time period in this prophecy? There are a day, 1,260 days, a month, 42 months at 30 days per month, and then a time times half a time, or 300 prophetic years at 360 days a year. So all of them are mentioned together once you put the entire series of 7 together there. Now, the year-day principle is all throughout the book of Daniel, actually. It's kind of woven into the very fabric of the book itself. And I'll give you just several examples. We're not going to go through all of this. Now, look at the bottom one. Let's first look at the top one, yeah. In Daniel chapter 1, verse 18, it says, Now at the end of the days when the king had said that they should be brought in, well, how long was their education? They were there being educated. And if you mentioned it as days to someone in this contemporary culture, they might think that maybe their education was maybe a few days. But in verse 5, it says, the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end they might be able to stand before the king. So 3 years mentioned in verse 5. How long was that? Well, yeah, it was at the end of the days, which was 3 years. In Daniel 2, verse 28, but Daniel says, there's a God in heaven who reveals secrets. He has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. And in the days of these kings, how many days? Wasn't it around 2,500 years over that? In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar, when he went insane, it says, they shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you. In verse 34, he says, and at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. So that close association between days and years. The queen mother in Belshazzar's party here, she says, there is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God, and in the days of your father. He was referring to Nebuchadnezzar, his grandfather, and that was about 50 years ago. How does it refer to God? It says, I was watching in the night seasons, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of what? How many days does God have? Lots of days. Are we there yet? You traveling? Are we there? I find it interesting that it mentions him as the Ancient of Days here in Daniel, and Daniel is dealing with a lot of time prophecies. Well, unto 2,300 days then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. In verse 26 it says, and the vision of the evenings and the mornings which was told is true. If we looked at the Hebrew of the word days, it would literally say, for unto 2,300 evening mornings. But every translator translates it as days. All right, so it's an idiomatic expression for days. And so when it says the vision of the evening and the mornings, it's referring back to the 2,300 days. And then he says, therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. And then 70 weeks are determined upon your people in your holy city. There will be, and there's 7 weeks and 62 weeks. After 62 weeks, so this is the prophecy of Daniel 9. Daniel 11, and those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame. That's during the dark ages. And then Daniel 7, verse 25, and Daniel 12, verse 13, but you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days, many years into the future. Now, the word days in these passages only makes sense if days represent years. Otherwise, it'll be contradictory and confusing. It will be contradictory and confusing. So we'll have to stop it there, and we will then look at the Cheseaux discovery and the Daniel cycle. So we will look at this, we will look at his hypothesis and see if this provides an answer to these harmonizations, all right? So if you have the PDF, you can race ahead and get the answer. Okay, okay. We have one suggestion to go to 7:30. This is a dangerous thing to say to a preacher. Skip.
Oh.
Yes. Okay, question.
Has anybody ever looked at the times, days, years, weeks, months, and looked at their context and found that there's some type of a reason that that particular time frame was used in each one of those places?
You mean within the prophecies, within what we just shared?
Yeah, within those prophecies.
Like, why does it say days in this spot or month?
Yeah, is there something that, I don't know how to express it exactly, but is there something about the prophecy where months is used that it tells you something special about it, or?
Right. Not that I'm aware of. And I think it's not until you kind of group it all together that it forms an interesting answer to the Roman Catholic view that we should interpret these prophecies as literal instead of spiritual, instead of the year-day principle.
Yeah, if they reject, anybody who rejects that, it seems to me like you're taking the consistency out of the prophecies. You have, the prophecies just become disjointed mess.
Yes.
And there's no consistency in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely true. I can continue, and if anyone has to go, then we will of course understand that. Okay. So, the harmonization of the solar year and the lunar month. He discovered that both the 1260 and the 2300 years of Daniel's prophecies were remarkably perfect and accurate cycles. The moon and the sun, he discovered, would line up exactly every 1260 and 2300 years. Now, I don't know how that's possible, but he submitted this to the Royal Academy, and I'll get to some of those statements later. No previous astronomer had discovered this relationship. So he tested the hypothesis, and the sun and the moon and the sun would line up exactly every 1260 and 2300 years. Now, someone had pointed out to me, when you multiply 1260 by 2, what is that? That's 2400, what is that, 2520?
520.
Yeah. Why is it that they line up, every 1260 years and then 2300 years? I have no idea. And so I don't have an answer to that. I need someone with a larger mathematical, astronomical brain to figure it out, but this was what he came up with. Now, continuing on, an attempted harmonization of the day, the month, and the year. The 1260 years were a good fit, not quite perfect, yet with a remarkably small error. The 2300 years were even better. It was only off by 8 hours and 12 minutes. So that's what so he said, okay, let's test this out. Well, it's off by 8 hours and 12 minutes. That's a 0.005%.
Better than the 3,300 whatever.
Okay, that's, error over the 2300 years. Okay, so he tested that hypothesis for all three of them. So next, being the scientific person that he was, he wondered if the difference between 2300 and 1260, which is 1040, would provide the difference and make the perfect fit. Well, this is what he said. This period of 1040 years, indicated indirectly by the Holy Ghost, is a cycle at once solar, lunar, and diurnal or terrestrial of the most perfect accuracy. I subsequently discovered two singular confirmations of this fact, which I will explain presently when I have adduced all my purely astronomical proofs. May I in the meantime be permitted to give this new cycle the name of the Daniel cycle, and that's what he called it. So he deduced that every 1040 years they would line up and harmonize perfectly. And his hypothesis was the year-day principle and those figures of the 2300 and the 1260. So listen to what else he says. Such a cycle would never have been chosen by accident. So of all the numbers that Daniel could pick, all right, just forget about inspiration here for a moment. Of all the numbers that he could pick, he picks 2300, he picks 1260, he picks those numbers. It's like, how does that work? Such a cycle would never have been chosen by accident. And since it was not accidental, it must have been chosen by him who times the movements of the sun and moon in their orbits. The Cheseaux findings were confirmed at the time by, I guess that's the short form for, like in the French you would say monsieur, like sir, Morin and Cassini, who were celebrated astronomers of the Royal Academy of Science in Paris, who declared them in harmony with astronomical facts. So that's not only in de Kock's book, it's in Fromme's Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers. The only way that the daily, monthly, and yearly cycles can be completely and perfectly harmonized is if you assume a year is 360 days. Now again, a year is not 360 days. It's 365.2422. That's what a literal year is. So the only way that this is going to work is if you assume a year is 360 days, a month is 30 days, and the year-day principle. So there you have it. You have the answer to the question. Now, what are some implications of all this? Well, for one, like the existence of God. In day-to-day life, an event that has only one chance of occurrence in 10 to the power of 8, that's 100 million, is considered an impossibility. 10 to the power of 8 chances of occurrence to one non-occurrence, that's a fact. In scientific evaluation, it's 10 to the power of 15. When it comes to stating a law, it's 10 to the power of 50. I mean, those are like astronomical numbers. That's in Subodh Pandit. If you haven't had a chance to hear Dr. Pandit's stuff on, okay, Jimmy, I know, okay, yeah, really good. I mean, really good. And you'll find him on Audioverse. You can listen to some of his stuff there. The probability of Daniel knowing this without the inspiration of the Holy Spirit is so utterly small. In other words, did he just pick numbers out of the air? I mean, how could he have just picked numbers out of the air? So probability points to design and certainty, not chance. All right. Well, closely related to this is the inspiration of the book of Daniel and the scriptures. For several ages, that's centuries, the book of Daniel, and especially these passages of it, have been quoted and commented on by numerous and varied authors, so that it is impossible for a moment to call in question their antiquity. Who can have taught their author the marvelous relation of the periods he selected with solar-lunar revolutions? Is it possible, considering all these points, to fail to recognize in the author of the book of Daniel the creator of the heavens and of their hosts, of the earth and the things that are therein? And I think this is the Cheseaux. Okay, so the inspiration of the book of Daniel and the scriptures. And the importance of the year-day principle. The prophetic time periods of 1,260 days, 42 months, and 3.5 times, 1,260 days, 70 weeks, could never be taken as a literal 1,260 days, etc., as many interpreters have done. Preterists, those are folk that apply the 3.5 times to a literal 3.5 years that were fulfilled in Nero's day. Futurists have taken the same 3.5 times and applied it as a literal 3.5 years in the far distant future before the Lord returns. Both preterists and futurists are wrong, since literal calculations must be based on the actual number of days in a year, which is 365.2422. I remember visiting Edwin de Kock, and he was explaining to me how he came up with this. And he said it was as if a voice said, go get your calculator and punch in 365.24 by times 3.5. You don't get 1260. Okay? So if a literal 3.5 years is 365.2422, that's 1,278 days, not 1,260. The result is an 18-day discrepancy, as de Kock pointed out. This is why we must take all 7 occurrences of this 1,260-day period, because it's mentioned as days, months, and years. So we must interpret it within that structure. That's the only way 3.5 years is 1,260 days. Because a literal 3.5 years is 1,278 days. So if they're going to say everything is literal, then you should multiply it by a literal year.
Gives you a consistency.
Yeah, go ahead and say that again, Skip.
I was just thinking, having those different time frames, then that gives a consistency.
Correct. Exactly. You can't pick one of them off and then start futurizing and all of that. When you take all the 7 of them together, you discover that one time period is expressed as days, months, years. And so we're putting the whole thing together. Idealist interpreters have completely spiritualized away the specific historical nature of this time period. For idealists, 3.5 times simply represents the tension and battle between good and evil found in all persons and all institutions. The only way that the Cheseaux could solve this astronomical problem was by assuming that a day stands for a year. The year-day principle is thus actually grounded in the material universe then. It's grounded in the revolution of the earth and the moon around the sun. So if that thing is solid, then this interpretation is solid. This means that this principle proves the certainty of all things that are connected with this 7-fold prophecy. And then what about us on the personal level? If God can do this, then doesn't He have the most amazing plan for your life? That's just with 3 heavenly bodies. I mean, just look up at the stars at night when you go home tonight. And you're like, wow, how does He keep track of all this stuff? If He can guide the universe with such remarkable accuracy, then should we worry that He doesn't have a plan for us? What problem can we bring that He really can't solve? You know? So Jeremiah 29 verse 11, what does that say? I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil. In some versions, to give you a future and a hope. In Psalm 32 verse 8, he says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you shall go. I will guide you with my eye. So if He can guide all this stuff with such remarkable accuracy, then surely He can do the same for each and every one of us. So I hope you never look at that the same way again. And I think that is the conclusion of the presentation. Yes, Holly.
So if we look at what those time periods represent, the 1260, the years of the Dark Ages, basically, the 2300 allotted until the sanctuary cleansing would begin, and then the difference, like what would we call the difference in
Correct.
Bible terminology, like the difference that yields this perfect lineup, like how would you describe?
That's why I said this is a hypothesis, right? It's a because the whole idea of just picking the 2300 out of the air and saying, I wonder if this is going to work, or the 1260. And so he just thought about it and said, well, I wonder if this works. But he never would have gotten it if he had not, accepted this close relationship between days and years. I don't know what to call it. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. What do you call that gap? It's not really mentioned as a time period.
Yeah, like
What does it? Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I've stuck to the explanation that, the Bible can give us a light bulb, a hypothesis, in order to solve a problem. That's basically it. It can produce something to solve a problem. But if any of you have some other insight on that, I don't think DeCock had any either when I read his book. So, well, why don't we have a word of prayer? Some of you can ask some other questions. I'll be glad to try to answer. Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for your word, and we pray that we might put our trust in you, knowing that you can do above and beyond what we could ever ask or think when it comes to our lives and all the specific detail that is associated with them. We thank you that you can do some amazing things. Help us to call unto you, as Jeremiah 33 verse 3 says, call unto me and I will answer thee and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.